one race, competing visions for the future of New York City. A Democratic socialist, a guardian angel, a three-time governor, and the incumbent. Welcome to Battleground, New York City, the fight for your vote. I'm S.E. Cupp. You were at candidate events today. Tell me what you heard and what you saw.
Mayors have three jobs. You got to keep crime low, quality of life high, and the tax base growing.
And there are going to be strange twists and turns before the votes are counted and the dust settles.
I think that much we can count on. Let's get right to it. Welcome to Battleground, New York City, the fight for your vote, where we are focused on the New York City mayoral election for the next 13 weeks. Why? Because it's the thing that everyone's talking about. What's it going to mean for the Democrats? What will it mean for the midterms? What will it mean for Trump and Republicans? All eyes are on New York City, and we've got it all covered right here. I'm S.E. Cupp. Let's get started. Later in today's show, we'll meet a candidate, the self-described people's mayor, Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee running for New York City mayor. But first, let's get to the latest news from the campaign trail. Joining me now is Josh Greenman, managing editor of Vital City. Josh, it's good to see you. And for full disclosure, Josh was my longtime editor at the New York Daily News.
I never had to fix a sentence.
That's ridiculous and not true. but it's great to see you again, and I'm glad you're covering all of this for Vital City. Before I get to today's news, you've covered this city for a really long time. What's your top line on this race? Why is this one different?
I mean, for a lot of reasons. We had an incumbent mayor who was indicted by the feds and then basically unindicted by the feds. He bowed out of the Democratic primary, though he is a Democrat. We had a former governor, usually referred to as a disgraced former governor, who left office just a couple years ago, who came back, was the presumptive nominee, Democratic nominee, lost the Democrat to a 33-year-old Democratic socialist. He's now running in the general. So we have an incumbent mayor running in the general election. We have a former governor running in the general election. We have a 33-year-old Democratic socialist running as a Democrat in the general election. We have Curtis Sliwa, who I think you're talking to later today, who's the Republican nominee running in the general election. And we have another independent running. So it's a very, very crowded field. Typically, the general election is a bit of a pro forma affair in which the Democrat just wins, not by acclamation, but pretty much going away. This is an actual real fight with headlines every day, every week, and it's interesting.
Do you see it as a shoo-in for Mamdani? We've had differing opinions from reporters and people who cover the city on the show.
I mean, people who know more than I do about polling will tell me that it's a shoo-in. I don't trust anyone or anything ever since 2015, 2016. Yes. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, that
I mean, he's running well ahead right now. All the polls tell you that he's running well ahead right now. If you were actually forced to bet, you would of course bet on him. But no one can make any predictions with any confidence in the current political climate, as far as I see.
Yeah, good advice. Our friend Errol Lewis, another fellow former Daily Newser, wrote today in New York Magazine that all of the candidates are pivoting right now and migrating to the political center in this race, and that's typical in a general election. But how will that go, particularly for Zohran Mamdani, who really made his name by distinguishing himself from other Democrats?
It's tough. He can't pivot on free childcare because that's a core promise. He can't pivot on freezing the rent because that's a core promise. It's on all the posters. He can't pivot on fast free buses because that's a core promise that costs $600-800 million a year. The kind of call and response top line promises that made his campaign, he can't pivot on. He can try to pivot on some of how he's characterized the NYPD in the past, some very harsh statements from 5 years ago on Twitter and elsewhere. And he's softened his statements. So that is definitely a pivot that he wants to make. And I think he'll probably be able to fairly successfully do that. But Cuomo's going to try to remind everyone of the things that he said all the time. And Sliwa's going to try to do that too, and others. So it's a bigger challenge for him to pivot to the center than for others, for sure.
Speaking of Cuomo, Politico is reporting today on his new quote unquote underdog strategy. I don't know if anyone, least of all Andrew Cuomo, has ever considered him an underdog. Will that work for him, this new role?
Well, I mean, it's kind of fun to see him feisty in the way that he's been feisty on social media. Um, it's likelier to work than what he tried in the
Yeah.
primary, that's for sure. But will it work? I think it's hard to see it succeeding. But Mamdani's fans are very, very strongly for him. The question
Mhm.
is to what extent there are undecided people that Cuomo can actually sway into his corner. Cuomo has very high negatives among the city in
Mhm.
general. It's true that he's closer to the political center and to the political center of New York City than Mamdani, but he has much higher negatives than Mamdani, and that's going to be a hard thing to
Do you think
fix.
older voters are his sweet spot?
Yes, older voters, African American older
Mhm.
voters in particular,
Mhm.
working class older voters. But it's not only. I mean, it's complicated, and the traditional blocks that everyone always refers to are never as simple as they seem.
Yeah, they're slipperier now too with social media and other things. Cuomo's continuing to attack Mamdani for his $2,300 a month apartment. Release the lease, as he's saying. We know that affordability and housing are top issues for New Yorkers, but do they care about Mamdani's personal housing situation?
Not in the way that Cuomo
Mm,
thinks. And I think Cuomo has tried to seize upon this by proposing a law that would actually it wouldn't evict people who are in rent stabilized housing, but it would make a lot of people in rent stabilized housing very, very nervous. And that's 40% of the people who rent in New York City. So he has put out this proposal that he thinks is a winner because he thinks that it points out Mamdani's hypocrisy. Um, a lot of people are very, very skeptical, and I think understandably skeptical that it is actually the political winner in the way that he thinks it is.
mm,
That having been said, you can ding Mamdani on hypocrisy. You can ding him on being wealthy and being in rent stabilized housing. In fact, I was the one who asked the question. I also volunteer with this group called the New York Editorial Board. And I said to him, "Do you deserve a rent freeze?" Because I knew he was in rent
mhm.
stabilized housing. And I tweeted that out through Vital City's account last week. And that's what Cuomo was seizing upon when he went into his screed about how Mamdani was denying that housing to some poor single mom.
Yeah, fascinating. And we've seen um, the wrath of Andrew Cuomo kind of come out over this issue. And for his part, Mamdani responded with, quote, release the list, which refers to the former governor's list of consulting clients since he left office. I'm wondering from where you sit, kind of at the center, having tweeted that out, will these personal attacks on each other, will this turn voters off?
It'll definitely turn some voters off. I mean, the other thing here is that Cuomo signed legislation back in 2019
Mm,
that actually moved in the opposite direction of the legislation that he's now suggesting be passed. He made it harder for there to be any income related measures restricting rent stabilized
mhm,
apartments for people. And now he's, as a political opportunist,
mhm,
going in the opposite direction. So I think Cuomo, as I said, has high negatives.
mhm.
Mamdani does not have super high negatives yet, but it will drive the negatives up. No
Yeah.
question. These attacks will. Will they turn people off from voting entirely? Likely some, but like I say, the core Mamdani support,
Mm,
um, I think they will mostly roll their eyes at Cuomo's personal attacks
mhm.
and not be swayed. How many people that is exactly? That's maybe 35% of the electorate or
Mm.
something like that.
One last one before I let you go. Eric Adams got a pretty big endorsement today from former Governor David Patterson. Um, will that help? Is David Patterson still an influential figure in New York City politics?
Nothing against him. I don't think endorsements matter
Mhm.
that much from almost anyone. When you have union manpower that helps get people to the polls in
Yeah.
theory, That helps. I've seen how uh, newspaper endorsements have mattered less and less and less over the
Right.
years. David Patterson is liked. David Patterson is not especially influential,
Mm.
and he's bounced around in his support, in recent months. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Josh Greenman, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you again.
Thanks very much.
Up next, candidate Curtis Sliwa will join us to talk about his run to be the next mayor of New York City. We'll be right back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, where we're laser focused on the New York City mayoral election. And we have a treat today. Joining us now is Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee running to be mayor of New York City. Curtis, it's so good to see you.
Oh, and I love that background. I look like I'm talking to you from heaven.
Yes, we don't want you to go there yet, but yes, it's a great shot. Um, I lived in New York for many years. You are a New York City fixture. Tell me your case to lead the city.
Well, number one, I am the Republican candidate, so I'm different than Zoran Mandami, who's Coca-Cola, and Diet Coke is Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams, because they actually share a lot of beliefs in common. They're the Democrats, I'm the Republican. But what I have this year that I didn't have the last time I ran against Eric Adams, the first ever independent line, Protect Animals, which calls for no-kill shelters and putting animal abusers in jail. That resonates with a lot of, especially women who are part of rescue groups, who really can be one-issue voters and may look beyond my Republican designation and give me a vote because they consider me to be considerate, caring, and somebody who is concerned about New York City, not just a tough guy. Like, you're a tough guy.
Mhm.
Remember, when you're a tough guy, SC, you don't have to say you're a tough guy. So I think we're more in need of concerned, caring, considerate leaders nowadays than tough guys.
Well, lots of New York City voters in the past have looked past the Republican moniker and elected Republicans to be mayor of New York City. Why should they do that again this year?
Well, we have a four-person race, and I know much of the discussion has been about who should drop out. Every day there's a conversation about that. Is a great day for Zoran Mandami because we're not talking about the issues where he's vulnerable. And if you were Eric Adams, even though you're down in the polls, you can't break double digits, why should he leave? He's a sitting mayor. Andrew Cuomo, he wants to be president. We know he wants to be mayor as a stepping stone. He's made that very obvious. On the other hand, I treat New York City like a mosh pit. I dive into all 350 neighborhoods, whether you like me, you don't like me. I'm the only person campaigning on the subways, which is a constant focus group. And as a Republican, I'm the first Republican who can ever go into neighborhoods where the only Republican they've ever seen is Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill and be accepted for what I've done with the Guardian Angels for all the years. And I'm also one connected to millennials and Gen Zers, unlike other baby boomers like Eric Adams, like Andrew Cuomo, who seem to be deaf to the fact that they're getting crushed with student debt, like my wife, Nancy, who's an attorney. So before you can even spend money the rest of the month, pay for the rent, you're living in a dormitory at the age of 35 that you thought you escaped after doing 4 years of college and graduate school. You're making $155,000. You're a financial analyst, a CPA, a lawyer, and yet you are mad because of the cost of living. And that's why Zoran Mandami has resonated with them. And that's where I go to get those, I would say, millennials and Gen Zs, most of whom are not enamored with Zoran Mandami, but we don't want them to be apathetic or indifferent either because they are the majority of the population now. I'm sorry, baby boomers, they are, and they are the majority of the voters.
Let's dive into those issues that matter to New Yorkers. Affordability is what you're talking about now. How are you going to make it easier for more people to afford to live and work in New York City?
Well, first off, we have about 100,000 apartments that are mothballed. Forget about constructing buildings. That takes for years. And the only ones who actually benefit are the developers because they're able not to pay any taxes for 40 years. And by the time their buildings are done, most of us will be dead and it won't be affordable. So secondly, 6,000 empty apartments in NYCHA, the one thing that a mayor controls, How do you justify mothballing 6,000 apartments in the 350 developments that make up NYCHA, which has a $4.5 billion budget, much of it supplied by the federal government, 60%. That's why you can't step on Trump's toes too often, because he controls a lot of the money. So you have rent subsidized apartments, which Cuomo and Zoran are going back like two rich kids, who are fighting in the schoolyard. But you got close to 30,000 of those apartments that are mothballed. And then in the outer boroughs, because I'm the mayor of the outer boroughs, nobody talks about outer borough issues, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. You have homeowners, 2-family, 3, 4-family now, who are not renting their apartments any longer because they're afraid of the nightmare tenant who you can't extricate, who becomes a squatter and a detriment. And so because of all of those things, in total, you have about 100,000 apartments that could be in the marketplace, readily available with a little bit of rehab. And I would rather focus on that by sitting with landlords, including the biggest landlord and the biggest slum landlord, New York City, the mayor of the city of New York. I'd be meeting with myself. And how can we get them out into the marketplace, make them affordable and rentable, and listen to all sides on that issue? That's how you can start housing people right away.
Public safety is another big issue. I work in the city every day. It does not feel as safe as it once did. I'm sure you can remember times when it felt much safer than it does now. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E. Cupp, that's your perception.
Tell me.
Don't you realize we live in the safest city that has ever existed? Of course, there's a lot of crime, especially if you're a woman. There is a war on women going on that men appear to be oblivious to in the subways, in the streets, in the parks. It seems like guys who are emotionally disturbed, not all of them, but some of them, decide to play the knockout game. They hit women. They leave them as if they're dead or they can't move. And then all of a sudden, it takes a long time for law enforcement to catch up to them. And that's because we're not dealing with the emotionally disturbed and the homeless who sleep in the streets, the subways, and the parks. I'm the person who's led the Guardian Angels for 46 years, who've gone into the subways, and we care for the homeless and the emotionally disturbed. But as mayor, I'll have the ability to help them get placed in shelters that are safe, which they're not now. There are 300 shelters. I've been to a third of them. Micah shelters for the mentally ill and the chemically addicted, which are it's like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. They are out of control. And if we don't get control of the shelters, people are not going to want to stay there and live there. And we must get the mentally ill, the mental health, that they are necessary to be able to function and be able to guide their own lives. And we're not doing either at the state level or the city level.
Curtis Sliwa, it's so great to get your deep dives on these issues, because this is what matters to New York voters. These really granular solutions. They're begging for solutions. I've got a lot more issues to talk to you about, so stay right there. Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. We'll be right back. Back again with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. One more time with candidate for New York City Mayor Curtis Sliwa. Another issue is reforming Rikers. This is important to you. Explain what that means.
Well, I'd like to know, because I go back to when Andrew Cuomo was the governor and Preet Bharara was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District, and they wanted to close Rikers. Not only have I been to Rikers, I've done programs from Rikers, radio programs, I've lectured at Rikers, I taught in the high school, and I've been locked up in Rikers. So I think I know Rikers completely. There's plenty of space. It needs to be rehabbed. Ventilation is really the key. And the toughest job in all of New York City is to be a correctional officer, particularly a woman. You know, it's mostly women of color now who are the correctional officers who get assaulted by the inmates on a regular basis. And where's the Me Too movement? You would think they would be coming to the aid of these women, many of whom are single mothers raising children. They are the ones who pay all the bills. And when you're a correctional officer, you're on 12-hour call. It's like a constant 911 call, because the gangs control the inner tiers. So Trinitarios, Dominicans, MS-13, Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, they run the jail. Your job is to keep them from escaping over the bridge into Steinway Street in Astoria. Other than that, the inmates run the prison, and now in this particular instance, it's under federal receivership. So de Blasio failed us with this. Adams didn't improve it. Cuomo wanted to close it. Now he doesn't know. This is like this guy. He's meds, poke. He's all over the map. I want to close it, or I don't want to close it. I would keep it open. And in fact, I would put more people on Rikers Island because more people deserve to be put on Rikers Island before they get their day in court.
So you're talking very differently about crime and policing and criminal justice than Zoran Mamdani. He's talked previously about defunding the police, abolishing one of the NYPD's special task forces, deploying mental health officials instead of cops to certain kinds of emergencies, decriminalizing turnstile hopping in the subway. Is he too soft on crime to be mayor of New York City?
No, he's actually hardcore on crime when it comes to protecting himself, because now that he won the Democratic primary, oh, how things have changed. He is protected 24 hours a day by NYPD police officers who are fully armed and ready to take out their guns if necessary. But for the rest of the regular people, you are not going to get cops with Zoran Mamdani. You're going to get social workers. Now, I'm the only candidate who is the legitimate target of an organized crime hit, shot on the orders of John Gotti Jr. To the Gambino crime family in June 19th of 1992. I don't have any security. When I was offered security, because I'm a major party candidate, the Republican, I told the NYPD, you know what? We don't have enough cops. Put them in the neighborhoods. The people need protection. They're not getting protected enough. But Zoran now, he's different than when he was candidate Zoran. You don't see him out there and about like he used to be, because he's a sanctimonious hypocrite like all politicians. Do as I say, not as I do. And I speak about Republicans and Democrats together. I don't trust politicians. I trust the people.
Well, you might get a chance. I hope you get a chance to tell him this in a debate, a general election debate. I haven't seen that one is scheduled yet. I know you faced off against Eric Adams already in 2021. How would you take on the candidates when and if there is a general debate?
First off, I'm going to speak to all the moderators who think that it's all about them and say, please, don't limit me to 30 seconds. We got a $34 billion state budget cap, and it's going to affect our Medicaid payments and educational payments. Mr. Sliwa, 30 seconds. How will you resolve that? Please, we need to have discussions. We need to have a conversation between the candidates, and the moderators should only intervene when things get a little too heated and you can no longer hear the discussion because the candidates are talking over one another. If there is one thing I'm going to plead with the moderators, stay out of this. Only intervene when it gets too hot and too heavy. Let the four of us go back and forth and have a discussion about real issues, not subsidized rental apartments and, oh, you're the rich kid, you're not the rich kid, you should drop out. Real issues, and then let the people decide. I don't want anybody to drop out. I trust the people. They'll make the choice by November 4th.
I got to ask you about this New York Times interview you did where, you took off your famous red beret, your work with the Guardian Angels, and that beret, they're a big part of what you're known for in New York City. So what was that? What was behind that? What were you trying to communicate with that?
Oh, what a smooth way you introduced that, SC Cupp. So now I'm forced to take my beret off for your audience because it has become a contentious issue for some. People know that I spend most of my time in the subways and streets, and that red beret readily identifies me as somebody who's there if you have a problem. But it's also the experience of 46 years in the streets and subways. Now, in corporate America and amongst the business folks, they seem to have a problem with me wearing a beret. It's the same message. But if it means taking my beret off, this is what I say, SC Cupp. I was born without a beret in New York. I will die in New York. I've never left New York like the three other candidates. So if wearing a beret will impact your vote and maybe deprive the city of having the people's mayor, Curtis Sliwa, I take the beret off, just like I've just done for all of you.
Well, Curtis Sliwa, I'm so glad that you came on Battleground NYC to talk about these issues and, talk to voters directly. That's really important. And I hope we get all the other candidates on as well. Come back and see us before this race is over, will you?
Oh yeah, don't treat me like a
Great.
bill collector. Invite me back again and again
Sounds
and
good.
again.
I will. Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.